Finally tonight, NASA is celebrating the first full year of the James Webb Space Telescope with a breathtaking new image of stars at the moment of their birth. This cloud complex is located some 390 light years from Earth and contains about 50 stars, each with the mass of the sun. In a statement, NASA said in just 1 year, the telescope has delivered on its promise of revealing secrets of the universe like it's never been seen before. Well, from this dangerous weather to the contaminated beaches, that's right, dozens of beaches across the Northeast are closed or restricted due to high levels of bacteria found in the water. CBS's Elaine Quijano spoke with health officials about the risks.
There's a lot of bacteria in the water. We recommend nobody swim in it.
Swimmers at Constitution Beach in Massachusetts were told to swim at their own risk. Health officials have posted warnings at 71 beaches across Massachusetts. Water tests have shown high levels of fecal matter and colonies of bacteria that could make swimmers sick. High levels of fecal matter and colonies of bacteria that could make swimmers sick. High levels of fecal matter and colonies of bacteria that could make swimmers sick.
I have health issues I would be vulnerable.
Officials say recent heavy rainfall along the East Coast triggered runoff from overflowed sewer systems, causing the buildup of human waste in the water.
What's the danger if people go swimming in this water?
Many could have a mild illness, something like nausea or vomiting. Some people can have skin reactions.
Massachusetts is one of 5 states that have advisories or closures because of bacteria in the water. In 2022, more than 1,400 beaches nationwide had at least one swim advisory or closing.
Once we test, if that result is positive or a high level of contamination, we go out and do a second test to be sure. If we have two positive tests in a row, then we'll ask for a posting at that beach.
The restrictions across the country are taking a toll on businesses that rely on tourism. At Kelly's, business is down 40% from last year.
We haven't had the normalcy of a summer here on Revere Beach due to the closures.
This beach in South Boston is one of dozens where the water is off limits today because of high bacteria counts. Now, health officials say those most at risk from polluted water include children, the elderly, and people with compromised immune systems.
Turning now to the relentless heat wave, and relentless is a word here engulfing much of the nation. Have you ever seen the weather maps look orange and red and yellow and purple I saw the other day, and magenta? There you go. I've never seen anything like that. This is a major health concern with more than 111 million people under extreme heat alerts. Parts of Arizona and Texas have had triple-digit temperatures every day this month with no end in sight.
Today, what would it be like if you lost power in your home, perhaps permanently? We'll hear why that could happen because of a surprise attack on the U.S. Plus, we'll look at the heavy flooding in Vermont and the heat wave affecting much of the country. We begin with the possibility of a devastating attack on the U.S. that could affect your home. The heat wave in parts of the country is straining the nation's aging electrical power grid, and temporary brownouts may occur. But what would happen if the United States lost electricity permanently? Electromagnetic pulse bomb experts warn America's enemies are already getting ready to launch such a strike. And Gary Lane explains why one expert believes such an attack is inevitable.
An electromagnetic pulse bomb, or EMP, is a nuclear weapon designed to explode high up in the atmosphere and knock out a country's electrical power grid.
Hits the Earth's surface, feeds into our electrical wiring. It starts shorting out the entire power grid. If they launch 3 missiles, eastern, central, western United States, it would shut our grid down permanently.
Nuclear weapons expert, the late Peter Pry, agreed. 5 years before his death in 2022, Pry warned that Kim Jong-un's launch of a high-altitude ballistic missile was a test of North Korea's EMP capabilities against the United States.
The Japanese and South Korean military both described it as practicing for an EMP attack because it was burst on ascent deliberately by the North Koreans when it was at an altitude of about 71 kilometers.
The higher the altitude of the missile, the wider the area of destruction. Pry explained how it would devastate an unprepared United States of America.
Cars would be paralyzed. Airplanes could fall out of the sky. You'd have natural gas pipeline explosions, nuclear reactor overloads. And worst of all, if you had a protracted blackout, it would be a serious threat to the survival of the American people.
No electricity means no pumps to provide enough water needed to irrigate and grow crops. And since America only has a 30-day reserve food supply, 90% of the population would likely die within 1 to 2 years of the EMP attack.
In other news, severe weather is still hammering the country as catastrophic floodwaters are pouring through Vermont and other parts of the Northeast, and more rain is on the way. Meanwhile, landslides destroyed about a dozen homes in California, with more at risk. And on top of all that, intense heat continues to bake the Southwest.
Sudden death among healthy working-age people worldwide is skyrocketing. Here in America, it was up 40% during the third and fourth quarters of 2021. Edward Dowd is the author of the book, Cause Unknown, The Epidemic of Sudden Deaths in 2021 and 2022. He contends a 10% jump would have been a 1 in 200-year event, but the 2021 jump was 40%. Might COVID-19 have skewed the numbers, or was it something else? Here's a look at Gary Lane's interview.
2020, it was mostly old folks who died of COVID with comorbidities. Then there was a sudden mix shift in 2021 and 22 and continues in 23. And my work and my partner's work points to something that happened with the employed of our country. It's been detrimental to your health to be employed in 21 and 22. And we examined the Society of Actuaries, which is an industry group for insurers that does surveys. In August of 22, they came out with a survey for their group life policyholders. And group life is a specific policy for those who onboard to Fortune 500 or mid-sized companies. You get this death benefit as kind of a freebie when you onboard, and you get 1 or 2 extra salary. Should you die, you get that, your family gets that, or your beneficiary. You have to be employed at the time you get it. Well, this is a great business for insurance companies. And in 2021, the whole industry experienced 40% excess death in ages 25 through 64. The millennials, 25 through 44, were hard hit particularly. The group life policyholders generally die at 1/3 the rate of the general U.S. population in any given year. And in 2021, I just said they had 40% excess death. The general U.S. population had 32% excess death.
Well, it seems like, tell us about some of these unexpected sudden deaths. It seems like there are a lot of them. I mean, just from a Google search, you can find like a lot of 12, 14, 16, 18-year-olds that are just dropping dead suddenly. Tell us more.
Right. And in my book, I talk about sudden death, and we look at the sudden deaths of athletes, which, did it happen before 21? It did. There was a study in 2006 by the Lausanne Institute in Switzerland that showed over the course of 38 years, they found 1,101 sudden athletic deaths, which is about 29 a year globally. We'd be lucky to have a month with just 29 since 2021. In my book alone, there's hundreds and hundreds of examples. So something's changed. I obviously blame the vaccine because that's what's changed in mandates. And, the naysayers will tell me it's COVID, long COVID. Well, if that's the case, why did it not affect the young in 2020? And so we have a health problem, a national health crisis, and at the very least, it should be examined and discussed openly. Unfortunately, the vaccine is a taboo subject, and it's not allowed to be discussed in the mainstream media or pretty much anywhere near health authorities.
The White House is reportedly considering supplying cluster munitions to Ukraine. That's despite human rights groups urging both the Ukrainians and Russians not to use the controversial weapons, which are banned in many countries. Reporters have been asking the NATO Secretary General what he thinks of the possible move.
It is for individual allies to make decisions on the delivery of weapons and military supplies to Ukraine. So this will be for governments to decide, not for NATO as an alliance. We are faced with a brutal war, and we have to remember that this brutality is also reflected in the fact that we every day see casualties, and that cluster munitions is used by both sides. or cluster munitions are used by both sides. And Russia used cluster munitions in their brutal war aggression to invade another country, while Ukraine is using it to defend itself. The best way to end this brutal war is for President Putin and Russia to stop attacking another country. That's also the best way to stop all the suffering, the casualties, and the death we see caused by different types of weapons on the battlefield every day.
Ever since the Wagner mutiny, the main question we've been asking is, what on earth is going on? And nearly 2 weeks on, we still don't know. The deal that had been announced was pretty clear. Yevgeny Prigozhin goes to Belarus, and Wagner fighters who want to join him also go to Belarus. But we see no sign of that. From mutiny to missiles and the Russian nuclear warheads, the Kremlin says it's moving to Belarus. Would Mr. Lukashenko have a say in whether to launch them? I remind him, recently you said, God forbid I should have to take the decision to use nuclear weapons.
Joe Biden could say the same, and Prime Minister Sunak.
But these aren't your weapons, they're Russian ones. It's not your decision to take.
In Ukraine, a whole army is fighting with foreign weapons, with NATO weapons, because they've run out of their own. So why can't I fight with someone else's?
But these are nuclear. We're not talking pistols.
Yes, nuclear. They're weapons too. And make sure you mention we're talking about tactical nuclear weapons here.
The logic of a leader who, with an iron fist and the Kremlin's backing, has held power for nearly 30 years.
Now to an NBC News exclusive involving the growing tensions between China and the United States. Our Courtney Cubie with an inside look at the military operation underway. She sat down with an American general who recently warned that war could be just 2 years away.
Tonight, amid growing tensions with China, we're with American forces in the Pacific, where General Mike Minahan is preparing his airmen for a mission he's warned could come soon.
Do you think the U.S. could be at war with China in the next few years?
It's not me to say whether we could be at war with China in the next few years.
Earlier this year, Minahan, the head of Air Mobility Command, wrote a controversial memo to his commanders warning the U.S. could be at war with China in 2 years, and they need to be prepared.
Do you still believe that?
I don't believe conflict is inevitable. I don't believe it's unavoidable. But I also believe that ready now is what matters most.
There have already been flashpoints. This Chinese fighter jet recently buzzing an American surveillance plane, and this Chinese warship crossing dangerously close to an American ship in the South China Sea. Minahan now preparing with Exercise Mobility Guardian, 70 aircraft and more than 3,000 airmen from 7 countries, the largest readiness exercise in the command's history, including this British cargo plane dropping off U.S. equipment, then simulating a medical evacuation. Also practicing resupplying bases in remote areas.
Cargo door, acknowledged.
This mission to drop supplies to airmen establishing a base on a tiny island north of Guam.
We're directly over the drop zone right now. About a dozen aircraft are beginning to drop their supplies and aid to the troops below.
In his memo, Minahan told airmen to get ready by firing from a clip and to aim for the head.
I'm not trying to be provocative. I'm trying to provide my formation with the tools and the action and the priority necessary to win.
Do you still agree with everything you wrote in that January memo?
I agree absolutely with the urgency and the action.
Are you ready now?
We are ready now.
Also this morning, new overnight, North Korea firing a long-range intercontinental ballistic missile off its east coast, just days after Pyongyang threatened to shoot down U.S. reconnaissance planes. It landed between the Korean Peninsula and Japan. CNN's Mark Stewart joins us live from Tokyo. Mark, what do we know?
Hi, Phil. Good to see you. For a good part of the morning, military forces here in Japan and South Korea were on alert, monitoring this missile launch. This missile was in the air for 74 minutes. This time duration, viewed by experts as significant, seen as a big deal. We should also point out that this missile was launched at a very specific angle where it would have a very short flight. Again, only 74 minutes. However, this is a missile that has the potential of crossing the ocean, landing in other continents, and that is why there is so much attention to what happened over the last 12 hours here in the Pacific region, at least.
Yeah, the time duration was what struck me, and also when this actually happened. Obviously, we've been talking all week about the world leaders meeting at NATO. We've just learned that South Korea's president will be holding an emergency meeting there over this latest launch. What are the expectations from that?
Right. Well, let me just say this. And as you well know from spending time in the region during the G7, North Korea craves attention. And when you have a gathering such as the NATO summit, something like this is ripe to happen. As far as the South Korean meeting, it is believed that it has included defense ministers, other top officials. South Korea has made comments today saying that there will be consequences. As far as what happens next, that's still ambiguous. I can tell you, though, having spent time in the region, I wouldn't say that people are necessarily alarmed at this point, even though South Korea is saying there could be some consequences. I think at this point, this is just a general awareness that North Korea continues to move things step by step further.